Well, hello everybody. I want to do this called the Canada Scam 1867 to 2024, and I wanted to just take on a couple notes here, not a whole lot, but I want to stay on point with this video tonight. I'm tired. I had to move camps, but I got a much bigger room, bathroom, and I got a computer chair, nice desk. It's pretty good. And it's going to be good for writing, which I have lots of that to do this month. And I'm working shutdowns, so I have to really put in my time, my hours, and get it all done. I itemized everything into a lot of comments, and today my messenger really exploded. And I know I haven't kept up with it for many weeks, and a lot of people probably feel like I'm ignoring them, but it's work. So, I'm going to start with 15-minute cities, and it's food, energy, housing, and security. This is not a new thing. It's very, very old. Not one of the oldest things in the world, but it's up there. It's been around and alive in constitutional monarchies for a very long time. Even in communism that came out of empire systems, constitutional monarchies that failed in revolution. One of the spin offs was communism. That was an evolution in our very, very recent time. Communism is not old at all, folks. The whole concept of 15-minute cities has been around for a very long time. We see it in the British Empire, we see it with the UK itself. A lot of people can look at the Dark Ages and you will see the concept of 15-minute cities. And these concepts, not only the 15 minutes to get around and your work's that close, your lack of ability of freedom of movement because you are food insecure, you are energy insecure, and you are housing insecure. People can't even afford the homes they have, which are low level, disgusting. In the time of the height of the British Empire, in these times, people literally lived in their own feces and urine because if you were poor, you were at the base of the street, and everybody who had more money above you dumped their excrements out the window, and that was right at your doorstep. So if you lived at the bottom, aka bottom of the pyramid, you literally lived in the shit and piss. And this continued on. Communism was the last to showcase what they're trying to present here in Canada and throughout the Commonwealth. Again, nothing new. It's just so many generations since people have seen it. But it was Principat, which is Chernobyl, where Russia's Chernobyl was. It was the height of communism just before the fall. And when you look at that city that was of Chernobyl, that's how the city was designed. Needed papers to leave. You used the government's transportation system. The people were energy poverty, food poverty, well, insecure, and energy and housing insecure. You lived in what was assigned to you in your system. Not very good. Well, this is exactly where Canada's going, and it's been done many times, like I said, in kingdom histories, but we've really seen the ramping up of it just in the last 10 years. People are just getting on mainstream about this for Canada, who's been actively showcasing it. The C40, you look at the 40 cities, guess where all 40 cities are? They're in the nine kingdoms, the old world order nine kingdoms that have loved class structure and impoverishing people to the point it's disgusting, it's wrong, it's sick, but yet people don't want to wake up to that reality, even though it's right in front of us. I want to do a real important point here about these nine kingdoms, and they also currently now, out of 26 of colonial asset countries that you see all the time on mainstream media, you click them, you'll click and it said, who's got the worst debt to GDP? Who's got the worst household debt to GDP? Folks, they only showcase crown monarchies or colonial assets. Those are only ever the nations, and they'll throw USA in there too, but everybody else was colonized or is a colonial themselves. The latest you should all look up is the 26 world nations household debt to GDP ratio, where they try to say, see, Canada's not so bad. Well, folks, 26 nations are out of 193. Why are they only showcasing 26 nations? They don't want Canadians or anyone in the Commonwealth or anyone in a colonial situation. They don't want you to see anything outside of your very sick and disturbing reality, your massive taxation, your massive debt to GDP ratio across all three markers. They don't want you to look at 80% of the other UN states. No, no, no. Canadians don't want to know that or see that. It's important that all the media only focuses on the subject areas, people who are in subject land. Yeah, they don't want you looking at people who are citizens or people who've escaped monarchical designs or colonialism. Don't look at those things. It might change your perspective. Considering when you start looking at taxation, you also notice that the higher they're taxed, the more household debt to GDP ratio you have. Canada's way off the charts, way off the charts. But they try to make it look like you're almost just only in the high end. They don't want you to see a big picture of the rest of the world. This is done all the time. It's very frustrating in economics when a majority of the world says something else, but yet what's fed and spoon-fed to Canadians constantly on your computer, on your ads, on your TV is, oh, great, wonderful, oh, don't listen, don't worry, you don't need taxation with representation, don't worry, it's good to be a subject, not a citizen, which is wrong, wrong, wrong. I want to get into First Nations and Crown fictions. This is a real big one, and I see it from Canadians, I see it from First Nations people who pump out some pretty big, epic fails, and it's sad to see so many gravitate to that. And I had a number of shares. Some people ask me, hey, what's the deal with this? And I'm going to try to make it as simple as possible so that people can understand it. From the Indian Act to Aboriginal to now Indigenous, nothing has ever changed for the First Peoples. When we look at all First Peoples in Canada, how they were legally designed from 1876, absolutely. The Indian Act is applied, absolutely, to all treaty, unceded, off-reserve status peoples. That's under the Indian Act. That's all the First Peoples. That's the word I use because we know who we're talking about here. It's all Métis. You can't have the status of Métis without strict legal reference to the Indian Act. The ICC, Inuit Circumferential Council, that's the Arctic peoples. You can't have that in Canada without strict adherence to the Indian Act 1876. That's important because there's several things that the Indian Act ensures for all First Peoples. And anyone telling you otherwise than this, I promise you, they have no standing in any academic circles, no government circles, and this should really trouble First Peoples who get suckered into that because you're not in relation to the United States, so you can kiss any help goodbye. You can never get help from UK, France, or other colonials, but USA is a big one you do really need. And if you can't get these minimum concepts and get them right, it's one, either you're working for something else or you have other objectives or goals, or you're just ignorant to reality. And like I said, with the Indian Act, when 1982's amendment, everybody, 1982 is just a major amendment. It was a major amendment for all Indian Act peoples, and they use the word Aboriginal. If you ever want to know about Aboriginal, and I had a talk with some First Nations today up here in Treaty 8. If you ever want to know an expert on that, you can go down Yellowhead Trail out to Paul Band Reserve, and they have a knowledge holder there, a well-educated knowledge holder who's a master on the English language and the word ab, and how Aboriginal, like abscessed, abnormal meaning not normal, Aboriginal meaning not original people or not human being, obsessed, that's an infection. We can go on and on. Every time you see the ab attachment to any word or adjective or pronoun in relation, it changes that pronoun, it changes that noun, it changes that adjective, or even in an adverb situation. So we can go through so many abstract, right? Meaning it's not normal to that condition, right? In art, it's abstract, all negative, negative, negative. And everything done in the 1982 amendment did not give First Peoples any rights or anything, and again put them in the charter, which isn't worth the paper it's written on, because there's the notwithstanding clause, there's several other powers of government to completely remove that. We know Section 33, and then post the charter, they tell you that the government doesn't have to follow any of that, and I think First Peoples, you have to know that that's the truth. From Aboriginal, we're now into Indigenous, and they say, "Oh, don't worry, you're holders of the land. You're there to take care of it." Well, with wildfires, the rest of it in the Crown lands, certainly there are no First Peoples on those lands, and I know First Peoples. I know a fella and a very strong Treaty 6 family in Treaty 6. I'm not going to say the town because they're actually pretty famous in that town, and everyone would probably likely know who that family is. And the one is doing very well these days in business, but he does go through Crown lands. He does stuff on adventures, but not in any major scale. But I can tell you, nobody's clearing the deadfall. Nobody's taking care of these vast, vast forests. And in fact, the First Peoples in the nomadic history of them, everything colonized, and when we look at what is private land in Canada or unceded lands in Canada, historically these are where all the big game, where all the animals, when there was a time of buffalo, bison, and many other herd animals, very much larger scale, these were the areas the First Peoples followed in that area. And of course, there were Plains peoples and all kinds of peoples. There were maple syrup economy peoples. There were even First Nations at the St. Lawrence major city that was burned to the ground. It even had palisades. This is all known, well documented, just never really talked about. Those Crown lands that the government holds for themselves, using the Indian Act, using the words Aboriginal, or even creating Indigenous. It's just another way to continue on with the Crown lands and keeping the First Peoples literally defined as savage. Now, I know there's legislation. Oh, the Liberals are going to change the Indian Act. We're going to change words so that these things aren't there because we can't have the world looking at it. You're still defined as less than human being. you're legally treated less than a human being. And what do I mean by that? And I'm going to showcase something never ever talked about. I'm going to give you all a real example that you can all look up on your phone. I'm going to prove something to all First Peoples in about 2 minutes time and all Canadians. And if this doesn't really hit at home where you can't deny it, it's real, it's in your face, it really explains all of this. When we talk about municipal power and they're talking about First Peoples and people get this wrong and they're blaming Trudeau. Trudeau's a piece of shit. But so are the Conservatives, so is NDP, Green, Bloc, PPC. We can go on and on through all the Crown parties. And this is the big problem, and it's in our legal system, our constitutional acts of Canada, and it's absolutely in the Indian Act of 1876, alive and well today in 2024. No matter what changes in words they use or craft, they're going to still mean the same, or mean in the Oxford realm what they mean, which means no change to anything, especially when the Constitution remains the same. So First Peoples, you invented federalism. What is federalism? I can tell you in the world today, there are 6 federalisms out of 193 nations. You invented it. The 2 most powerful federalisms in the entire world are our neighbors, Russia to the north, and our immediate neighbors to the south, the United States of America. Real federalisms. What's a federalism? It's when you have all these regions, meaning separate little peoples, and which you could say are tribes, like the First Peoples were, who created federalism. And what they said is, we fight amongst each other, we trade, we have conflicts, but when outside threats come to us, we need a way that we all agree that we give up our rights to certain powers that are not bestowed upon any one of us, but in fact another tier of government that has a key set of powers, a chief of set powers over all these other chiefs who have still all the regional powers, but there's a next level, like for instance war, peace, security, drought, famine, starvation, right? Hey, sound like energy poverty, wealth poverty, right? We need a new system to combat those things. Whatever those things are, we have to all agree that if it comes to these items, these are powers beyond us, and we all have to agree to give that power to another level that will have say over all of us. And we immediately have to respond to that. And the First Peoples did when it came to war in North America, Indian wars, way outmanned, way outgunned, way out technologically set. You were dealing with many, many centuries advanced of technological warfare, but somehow the First Peoples were able to organize like nobody else ever was able to worldwide and resist that for many, many more generations than anyone else in the world had ever seen. That's called federalism. And even though they didn't get along on all these other things, snap, oh, it's wartime with another power, everybody's organized almost immediately. It's like instant draft. Everyone's getting along. Everyone's fighting on the same front. And this was shocking to a lot of countries, and it led to America, and it also led to the Russian Federation of the time. And folks, what's interesting, guess who's the piggy in the middle who is a federalism too? Well, that's Canada. Its provinces have set powers and territories, and the federal government, that other tier, has a set amount of powers, not unlike Russia and USA. So there's 3 out of the 6 in the entire world that just happen to have all the First Peoples who invented federalism. Why talk about this and why this is going to get really important for people? Municipalities Canada-wide are under the provincial power of inside federalism only. No federal government has any powers over municipalities. What the federal government has on all the First Peoples is your reserves, and they want to convince you to become a municipality without provincial powers and rights. This is not the same for the United States of America, the American Indians. They most certainly have true federalism in all their reserves, who are all constituted and granted the same power as the 50 states. There's 155 of them. Federal government, 50 states, 155 American Indian peoples constituted. Boop, 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 all over, and a tremendous amount of land. That's what happened with federalism of the American Indian. Now, in Canada, that's been banned since 1876. The power of federalism was removed from the Canadian First Peoples on that line called Canada, and below is the United States, where they get pure federalism that all First Peoples invented. Even the Canadian First Peoples had it too. It's why you have unceded BC, unceded Ontario. It's also why there's a mass level of extinct tribes in Canada that are alive and well today just south in the United States of America. Yes, true. The most atrocity against the First Peoples, who are all one peoples in North America, happened in Canada at the worst and highest rate. Why? Get back to the 9 kingdoms. Now, to prove my point here, this is for all First Peoples, credible, real, verifiable. There is one reserve that I can tell you, Edmonton, Alberta, almost entirely encapsulates it. I'm tired. It's got it in its boundaries, nearly all the way around it. That's called Enoch. If you go to Enoch, just off 184th Street, you can look up the gas station. And people have seen this out in Ontario too, and I've seen it too. They say, hey, Treaty Indians don't pay taxes, right? If you have your treaty card, look, there's the gas. So I was on my way out of town yesterday, coming to work, and I stopped and I got gas there. I went down, it's 610 10th Avenue. It's the secondary, turns into White Mud Drive, and right there is that gas station as you go out to Anthony Henday. It's a short, rough jaunt for me because the road's pretty bad there, but I stop at the gas station and my eyes, boom, I'm majoring taxes right now. Super tax analysis of every province, territory, and the federal government, the entire breakdown, as well as the United States of America in comparative taxation, where I can prove that we're way overtaxed. But I can tell you all, First Peoples, you have no access to any federalism, and this idea of making you somehow self-governing is a lie. And the biggest lie is, go to that gas station. There is carbon tax, there's fuel tax, both federally and provincially, and excise tax, right? There's 4 taxes on your fuel. And in Alberta, at that Enoch, pull out your treaty card gas station, from $1.52, they reduce it 13 cents. That's the Alberta tax only. You're still paying all the other taxes. There it is, removed from federalism. You don't get removed from all taxation. You get hit with the vast majority because provincial's been removed from you. That's what you don't pay. You pay all the federal. That's the scam. If you ever want to see it, go to Enoch, go to the gas station, treaty card, Alberta's 13 cents. That's all you get taken off. Brutal, pathetic, because you've lost the provincial power. You don't get it on a reserve. You're only federal. And you'll never be a real municipality because legally in Canada, to have the powers of a municipality means you fall under the provincial crown, not federal. If you don't believe this, First Peoples Canadians doesn't matter. Section 91 lists all the federal powers. Section 92 lists the division of powers of all the provinces. First Peoples, until you get the power of a province, not a municipality, you're hoodwinked, you're scammed, you're screwed, and if you don't see it, please go look at that gas station right there on the most eastern boundary of Enoch to Edmonton. Go look at it just before Anthony Enday Drive off of what is the White Mud. It's at the point where White Mud's converging, then going out to gravel road, which heads down for many miles until you get to Spruce Grove, Stony Plain. But go to that gas station. Go look at the price of gas. Go look what taxes are removed with your treaty card. There's the absence of federalism. There's the proof there is no provincial crown power for you, and any concept of making you a municipality is an utter and total lie. Because if it really was the federal government with the First Peoples, and that was the wampum belt, two canoes, then you wouldn't be paying any taxes, but you're paying a boatload. They're the big boat, you're the small little canoe. And beside your small little canoe are all the subjects of Canada, the slaves. And sadly, you're defined as a savage people. Do not believe any politicians until you are given the constitutional power of a province. You will never have any real self-government, no self-determination, no nothing. You will be nothing, and you will never have any real land, because the only way to get land in Canada is to have a provincial crown bestowed upon you or a federal crown bestowed upon you. And they're not bestowing on those on you. Province power is one of the federalisms. Section 92 onward, a whole pile up to 108. None of that is bestowed upon the First Peoples. Section 91, the government enforces on you. Sure, some of those who enforce this brutality against the First Peoples on such small amounts of land in reserves, like Israel to the Palestinians, like the white crown over the South Africans during apartheid, like the Nazi Germans over the Jews during the Holocaust period. We can go on and get into so many countries. Right now, a good friend of mine, academic, is going through all of these imposed constitutions, interim constitutions. The UNSC has done it 84 times since World War II. Many for Africa. When you look at the 50s, the 60s, there's 40s too, and then there's countries that said, eat it, I'm not going to do it. And when they fell and got obliterated by other countries because they had no UN status, everybody else wisened up and they went with the Allies. And they learned federalism because lots of the Allies' interim constitutions not only gave equality to the person, this was done by Russia, even in communism. Now they're the Russian Federation. And just recently, South Sudan, yes, there's horrific things happening there again, but it wasn't always South Sudan. It was once just Sudan, and they divided, and they did it with an interim constitution. They did it through a legal referendum in constitutional conventions completed by the UNSCP 5. This was just recent. Many countries who've tried to go it alone, or regions who've gone it alone, always end in epic failure. The most recent example was Catalan in Spain. There's still people in jail there, even though they won their election in the 90 percentile. Canadians First Peoples. I just had a huge debate, my first ever, with a justice, a superior justice in Canada. It's caused me a little bit of trouble. I don't know. I'm hoping I don't get removed from my class. But that debate on these concepts, I can promise you, the lies that this justice told, and I'm not saying the justice is a liar, the justice is telling the truth of the crown in their superiority and how Canada narrates it to all of South America, a continent of many countries and literally 770 million people. Basically, we're saying that there's no such thing as conventions and constitutionalism, not in Canada. Their idea of conventions isn't even published anywhere in Canada. This is what your crown does. It's what they've always done to the First Peoples. Canada is a very old liar, and they lie, lie, lie. They lie to people all the time. They create new words, new laws with new wording, changes, but the changes only allow for one thing: their entitlement, their superiority, which is fascism. Fascism is when a human being says, I am superior to all of you. In fact, you're all below me. I'm entitled from God. That's a fascist. That's already the workings of a fascist. And when you nationalize it and you create a group of people who are superior, and then you have a non-human being or inferior peoples below you, that's a fascist. That's a fascist, and they believe that they can make laws to only empower them at your detriment. That's a fascist. That's Canada's entire political structure from 1867 till today. What is a socialist? Believe it or not, the Russian Federation has 14 different definitions through the Lexilogos on socialism. They have the most unbelievable, massive publications you could ever get your hands on socialism. I mean, they went through communism, people. They are the masters of socialism. They define 14 different types. When I say Canada's politicians are socialist and fascist, I just explained fascist. What is a socialist? Let me tell you what's a socialist. And when you get to degrees of socialism, when you're a pure socialist, you exist on other people's labor, other people's wealth that you've transferred to yourself. Folks, politicians are entirely paid tax-free from tax-paying Canadians and First Peoples. Through your lands, through your resources, through your labor, through your wealth, through your property that you've worked hard for. That's how they exist entirely. That is the purest definition of socialist. Purest. They take your money for themselves at an explosive rate. When they say, hey, inflation's a big deal, let's give ourselves a raise plus the inflation. And meanwhile, all of you guys are now increased in inflation. Me, you, everybody, because of their take. That is a pure socialist. So when people sit there and go, you're wrong, it's not true, it is most certainly true. Socialist and fascist. Go look up the definitions for yourself. Don't trust the Crown or Oxford, because I can promise you Webster's USA defines it all differently. Russian Federation defines it majorly differently, but not unlike the USA, just in certain respects in much more detail, in much more historical account, as they've explored it like none of us have out west, except for the Crown, who is pure. Pure socialist, pure fascist. If you can't figure that out, if you can't figure out that we're overtaxed beyond all belief, our debt to GDP ratio in our three categories is beyond belief in the world today. You can go all over the world. Canada's in the top tier, top 5 percentile. That should scare you. And who are the other ones above us? Oh yeah, 4 out of 5 of the 9 kingdoms. And it's only the ones with the biggest stroke who colonized who are doing a little better than us. Why? Because they're using fascism and global socialism to fill their pockets. People focus on billionaires, and I get it. These second-class billionaires, I can tell you all. I've been through the thick and thin of this. Climate and more, much more. I've been on the whole business side of it. Sat in Zooms where there's literally 1,500 members. Soros, Gates, Rothschild, Rockefeller. These people can all be replaced. Sure, old families. You look at Rothschild, it goes right to the UK. And only in recent time, really. We're talking in the early 1800s, 1838. He's relatively new to the scene in the old money. When you really want to chase it, it's the crown and all those defined as crown. These billionaires are empowered to make those people millions at your great expense. Otherwise, they get replaced by somebody else. You can look at the history of all the companies and all the evil, the atrocity, and you will find the crown supported it every step of the way. These people are under the crown. They don't own militaries. The crown does. And if you don't believe that, go look at G4S and then its next counterpart. They even bought out the United States. How do you think the Democrats have gotten so sick in such recent times? How is Joe Biden so corrupt? I'm going to leave my video at that tonight, folks. The biggest thing is the 15-minute cities understanding that they're not a new phenomenon. You'll find I was into that more than 6 years ago, deadly accurate, and it's a big wave now, but the way people are taking it is going off the charts. I've explained the First Peoples deadly accurate in Canada. Nothing like the exact same peoples south of the 49th parallel, pretty much, besides Ontario. Anyone in the boundaries of Canada that's a first person is legally defined as a savage. All Canadians are legally defined as subjects. When you go to the United States, they have a wampum belt right across. It's called American citizen and American Indian citizen with the same exact powers. 50 states, 155 American Indian communities with the full power of a state. Yeah, that's truth. Canada, no way. You have zero federalism, banned in Canada. No first person under the Indian Act. Again, who's this? All treaty, all ceded and unceded. That's Métis and Inuit. Go read the ICC, Inuit Circumferential Council, Legal Design Canada only, and you will find when you open that act that creates the Inuit, you can't even be Inuit without first being applied to the Indian Act, meaning this act is in existence, this creation in Canada's boundary is only existence by putting those people under the Indian Act. Métis, same thing. Go look for yourself. Go look at taxes. Enoch gas station, 13 cents off a liter only with a treaty card. And this goes, I can go to other provinces. I saw it in Ontario too. I've been to Six Nations. I saw it there too. You aren't given the powers of a province in Canada's federalism because there's only two crowns, federal and provincial, and you don't have any of that. Are you under crown-imposed governance at the federal level? And yes, these people are lower-level crown persons listed constitutionally. Sure. but not the vast, overwhelming population of First Peoples, just like the vast amount of Canadian subjects. You're not in the Constitution. Neither are the First Peoples. Aboriginal, I've gone through that. I've explained it. You ever want to hear somebody teach you that? Paul Ban Reserve, Yellowhead. He'll teach you that. Master of all of Canada, deadly accurate, educated, has academic standing, credible, real, verifiable. Learn the truth. Indigenous, learn the truth of that scam too. Where's your provincial crown? Where's your federalism? Not there. I've explained it. The power of municipality is only there if you have the power of the provincial crown, which they aren't going to give you. That's my video. Share, share, share. Don't know how to make it any easier than that. It's up to all of you. It's credible, real, and verifiable. It's your truth to get out there, whether people like it or not. Painful truths are better than manipulative lies or false information, because that doesn't serve anybody but the crown. The crown we need to destroy. The corruption of all corruption. The pre-commie. Bye now.